to the decedents.
We're going to take a break from review of testimony in the Adam Matos case out of Florida to bring on another guest because it's Veterans Day and we're talking about legal issues that surround veterans. Ken Eiler is a Veterans Assistance Project Director with the New York City Bar Association. He's joining us here on in our LawNewz studios, rather. So good to see you here on LawNewz.
Thanks for having me.
So when we talk about legal issues that are special to veterans, we were just talking about a couple of different avenues. You kind of have two groups of legal issues that veterans can face, and I thought we would start there.
Sure. Veterans face a range, potentially, of legal challenges when they separate from military service. There can be those legal issues that anybody has, dealing with finding a place to live. I'm fond of telling people that if you live in New York City and you don't have to be a veteran in order to have a dispute with your landlord if you're renting.
Yeah, that's pretty universal.
That's pretty universal.
Everyone everywhere, not just in New York City, can have a dispute with his or her landlord.
That's right. That's right. So there are those civil laws that are that everybody has, and they're not unique to veterans. But then there's this whole other class of legal issues that can arise for vets by virtue of the fact that because of their special status at one time they served in uniform, they may have legal issues also that are unique and that a civilian wouldn't otherwise have.
What are some of those issues? I know we have the housing, education, we've got healthcare, we've got disability access, all of those sort of roll together, and some of them are in the civil side, such as the housing that you mentioned. What are some of the very unique ones? Are we primarily talking about disability access?
Yeah, a lot of what we're talking about in terms of unique acts is it can be healthcare, because veterans, if they have some type of, if they're low income or if they have certain types of disabilities, they would be eligible for health care through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. But if they're denied that care, then there's an administrative legal appeals process that they can utilize to try to reverse the VA's decision. Similarly, if they have some type of service-connected injury, condition, or disability, the military and the VA have their own system, basically, of workers' comp, if you will. You don't get workers' comp when you are in the military, because it's the one job where, on any given day, you might be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice. So Congress established this own system that now dates back over a century ago to create this unique compensation system, and so veterans can receive monthly disability compensation benefits. That's also through the VA, and that's another example of an issue where all of these legal issues that are unique to veterans, there is an Article I court that Congress created about 30 years ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, that has exclusive jurisdiction to hear these cases.
So part of me wonders why these cases are litigated in the first place, because the average person looking into this system would say, look, if you're willing to serve the country and you're put in harm's way in some fashion, or you are serving, then you ought to deserve the benefits that flow from it. Why might the VA, for instance, reverse a decision or try to deny health care coverage?
One reason could be that Congress has actually put certain restrictions, legal restrictions in some cases. For example, one of the most common restrictions, eligibility restrictions, is that the veteran is what we call in veterans law parlance a bad paper veteran, meaning that they received a discharge from the services that was not an honorable discharge, but it was some type of either a lesser administrative discharge, they had some type of issue. And where it can really get complex is sometimes, let's say, a veteran may have received a less than honorable discharge, but perhaps what happened to them was while they were in the service, they may have developed post-traumatic stress. And so they began, once they got home, to act out, and they may have gotten into trouble or gotten into engaged in minor disciplinary infractions is sort of the military's catchphrase for it. But it can result in them, basically the commanders of these units saying, I can't take this person back out with me. And then them taking steps to kick them out, but as opposed to medically discharging them, which can be a really legally intensive process in the military, instead they are they're pretextually discharged with bad paper. So that's one type of a scenario where the vet wants to challenge that determination.
Is there anything contingent on time? Does someone need to be in the service for a particular length of time to be eligible for the benefits at a threshold?
Yes, there are certain time in service eligibility requirements that are fairly complex. However, if a service member in the very first week of basic training proceeds to break a leg or injures themselves, they're also then eligible for benefits irrespective of certain time and service requirements.
We seem to be in perennial wars right now against terrorism. We're active in a number of places around the globe. We have more veterans coming out of the system at younger ages based on those particular actions. And I see, just in the publications I read as an attorney, more and more bar associations, legal aid groups, and whatnot, saying that they're getting involved in veterans law. What's the need look like right now for organizations such as yours?
The need is significant. And it's also important, I think, that we contextualize the need. I mean, I'm a veteran myself, and one of the things that I always tell lawyers that are new to this practice area and are interested is it's important to remember that the VA estimates between 30 and 50% of the nation's 20 million veterans have some type of service-connected condition that would entitle them to disability compensation. So what that means, though, is the majority of veterans do not. So it's important that we not stereotype to sort of suggest all veterans are needy, even though it's a significant minority that are and that fall into that category. So, but the need amongst that subset is vast. Right now at my organization, if a veteran calls us today, I work with volunteers through the New York City Bar Association that will take these cases. It's going to take me between 5 and 6 months, most likely, before I can even identify a volunteer to be willing and be in a position where they're able to take that case. So the need is vast. One statistic I think I saw is the VA's own numbers suggest that between 30 and 50% of veterans have some type of service-connected condition. If you figure there's 20 million vets, that means that there's between 5 and 10 million vets that would qualify. Right now, by the VA's own statistics, the number of veterans receiving that compensation is 4.25 million. So that tells you there are literally hundreds of thousands of clients out there who are looking for assistance from a lawyer. And I think it's neat because, and obviously the need is not neat, but that lawyers really can make a huge difference, because at the end of the day, these are legal adjudications that the VA in most cases are making about these benefits.
And it's something that just directly influences people's lives in such a severe way, in a close way. Having someone get access to health care, I mean, that's a big thing.
Huge.
That's a life-changing thing.
Absolutely.
This isn't just, well, let's get you another apartment because of the problem with the landlord, just to use that housing example that we talked about earlier. But these are important things. Do you find that the problem is just that you've got lawyers who need training in this area? Is it that lawyers oftentimes just can't break away from the casework that they need to pay their bills and their licensing and whatnot to jump into this? What's the disconnect between the problem and the services?
Great question. It's probably a little bit of all of the above. One of the things that you're beginning to see the legal academy in this country recognize is that there is this big need out there, and more law schools all across the country are beginning to offer substantive legal and clinical training to law students. So I'm a great example. There wasn't a course offering when I was going through my law school on this area of practice where there is today. And I think that's probably going to continue. And what I think is important to keep in mind is prior to the Veterans Judicial Review Act that was passed in 1988, 87 or 88, veterans did not have the right to judicial review. The U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims didn't exist. So vets in that era, if the VA reached a decision that the veteran disagreed with, you were stuck with that. That was your final answer. You would just want to ask the VA to reconsider, and you did that until the cows came home. Well, Congress remedied that 30 years ago. But when you think about it, when we think about Whiteacre and Blackacre, property law, criminal law, these other practice areas that are centuries old, I tell people 10 years ago, veterans law wasn't even old enough to drink. It's just now going to have its 30th birthday this year. So that's significant. And it's for that reason also. So part of this is to utilize, lawyers can charge fees in these cases also when they're assisting veterans. It's set by regulation, the amount that they can charge. The VA permits that. But hey, if you're going to represent a veteran and make a life-changing difference for that vet, I don't have a problem with that. So I think the answer is pro bonos, the private bar, and the legal academy, really, and legal services attorneys, all four. If all four in the profession step up to the plate, it'll make a real difference.
It seems that it would, and it seems that it is in organizations like yours. And as I said, I'm just seeing more and more groups getting involved in this. And part of it, I'm sure, is the education quotient. Because as you said, this is a relatively new area of law. We don't have 500 years of case law to sort of inform decisions. And every once in a while, you know, civil law, we see some case come up where a court will dig all the way back into the 1600s to pull the original precedent and say, this is where it started and this is where it gets us today. We don't do that with this area. So the groups that are coming forward aren't necessarily just providing the services to veterans, but they're also trying to educate attorneys to say, hey, look, get with the program on this, learn a little bit about it, because the need is there.
There's a really interesting case that was recently heard at the U.S. Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, which hears appeals from the Article I U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And it's deciding this question, which initially the Article I court said, well, we don't have jurisdiction. Veterans basically don't have the ability to file a class action. Well, Federal Circuit has now remanded that case back to the court and said, actually, you do. Vets, in fact, do have the right to be able to file a class action lawsuit. So now this court is, there are 14 questions that the court is seeking amicus briefs on to basically solicit from the veterans community, from the legal community, and basically says, give us feedback, folks. Like, should this look like a Rule 23 under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, like what that mechanism looks like? Are there different considerations that we ought to be considering? So I throw that out there because if you are someone who, look, we lawyers, like you were saying, we like precedents, right? The more precedents, the more ammunition we can go into court with, we like. But if there's a part of your personality that goes, that's kind of cool because with the absence of precedents, there's really an opportunity to potentially make your mark or really have a broad impact in this area of the law that's still so young by comparison.
So when it comes to representing clients, I'm certainly not asking you to divulge the secrets, but is there sort of a general story you can tell us, a particular individual, you don't need to name the person, someone who stands out in your mind that you really helped and you look back in your career and say, this is why I do veterans law?
Oh, yeah, yes. I can recall that there is a veteran whom I represented for several years who had repeatedly been denied benefits for his post-traumatic stress. That was primarily the types of cases that I did. And in that particular instance, the veteran, who was an Iraq vet, had been trying on his own basically for 10 years by the time I came across him. And so after multiple attempts over those 10 years and multiple different claims, figured out what the problem was. And oftentimes these cases, you know, there's the law on this is actually, for most of us attorneys, we go, it's pretty simple. It's more or less torts. It's talking about causality. You have to be able to show that there's a connection of a condition to something that happened to the member in service. And you have to be able to, the VA is looking for evidence of that. So all too often, because so many vets do this without the benefit of counsel, they're doing this pro se, because that's how the system was designed for the, you know, going back to the Civil War. We've had some version of the VA back since Lincoln's second inaugural address. So that veteran had done exactly what he thought, you know, was what he was told, going through all the appropriate steps, but it had significant evidentiary gaps in the record. So once we were able to do that, now that veteran receives close to $50,000 a year in income, and with his health care completely provided for by the VA. So, you know, being able to have somebody who was essentially on the threshold of homelessness and getting them a stable source of income and getting them health care, it's incredibly rewarding.
Important stories. We appreciate you coming by. Ken Eiler, you are the person in charge of the Veterans Assistance Project, Veterans Assistance Project in the New York City Bar Association. Thanks for stopping by, LawNewz.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.